Now, my grandmother was a wonderful person. She taught me how to play the game Monopoly. She understood that the name of the game is to acquire. She would accumulate everything she could, and eventually she became the master of the board. And eventually, every time, she would take my last dollar, and I would quit in utter defeat. And then she would always say the same thing to me. She'd look at me and she'd say, "One day, you'll learn to play the game." One summer, I played Monopoly with a neighbor almost every day, all day long. We'd play Monopoly for hours. And that summer, I learned to play the game. I came to understand the only way to win is to make a total commitment to acquisition. I came to understand that money and possessions, that's the way that you keep score. And by the end of that summer, I was more ruthless than my grandmother. I was ready to bend the rules if I had to win that game. And I sat down with her to play that fall. I took everything she had. I destroyed her financially and psychologically. I watched her give her last dollar and quit in utter defeat. And then she had one more thing to teach me. Then she said, "Now it all goes back in the box." All those houses and hotels, all the railroads and utility companies, all that property and all that wonderful money. Now it all goes back in the box. I didn't want it to go back in the box. "No," she said. "None of it was really yours. You got all heated up about it for a while. But it was around a long time before you sat down at the board. And it will be here after you're gone. Players come and players go. But it all goes back in the box. Houses and cars, titles and clothes, filled barns, bulging portfolios, even your body. Because the fact is that everything I clutch and consume and hoard is going to go back in the box, and I'm going to lose it all. That's not much of an ROI on that. You have to ask yourself, when you finally get the ultimate promotion, when you've made the ultimate purchase, when you buy the ultimate home, when you have stored up financial security and climbed the ladder of success to the highest rung you can possibly climb it, and the thrill wears off, and it will wear off, then what? How far do you have to walk down that road before you see where it leads? Surely you understand, it'll never be enough. So you have to ask yourself the question, what matters?
It's an elusive question, isn't it? What does matter? As Pastor John Ortberg eloquently points out, our cultural obsession with more and this materialistic, self-indulgent vanity orientation that most people are concerned with most certainly does not matter. There's no such thing as property, and there never really was. I suppose the real question is, how do you evaluate relevance in your life, or more simplistically, are your values and beliefs actually relevant? And that's, of course, a very complex question. Even more complex is, what is the qualifier that you can use as a basis to decide such relevance? I'm not going to answer that question for you. I'm just going to throw that out there for you to consider. This is our October 21st weekly radio address. I hope everyone knows that this is now going to happen on a weekly basis every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Given my schedule, of course, but it should be fine. I think I can do it for an hour and a half every Wednesday. I probably will be some drops here and there, but I'm definitely focusing on keeping this as consistent as possible. There's lots of developments going on, and I think it's important that we keep everybody up to date on a weekly basis. So this episode is going to be a little bit different than the prior episodes, as I announced before. Essentially, we have three people. Essentially, we're going to stop doing all the question and answers unless we have no one to come on, which is very possible. But we're going to try and get different members that are very dedicated, that have been doing their own work, to come on the radio show periodically. And hopefully we'll have plenty of new members that are doing different projects to continually come on. And it should be very interesting to see the responses from other people other than myself. The first person we're going to have on in about half an hour is a person named Andrew Buxton, who has been doing a tremendous amount of work in the UK. He runs the Venus Project Design Project, and they're working on films, they're doing CGI renderings, they're doing a tremendous amount of work with the Venus Project. The Venus Project holds them in very high regard. So Andrew is going to tell us about their work, and that should be very enlightening because it's a great project. At the top of the hour, then we're going to have Gilbert, or Dark Dancer, who is ahead of the chapters, so to speak. He's our main organizer right now for chapters. We have other people that are coming in as well. They're going to be dealing with this expansive part of this movement. Chapters are extremely critical. In fact, I still want to throw out there that we need more state chapters. I get a lot of emails from people, and then they tend not to respond. I think people are a little scared to want to take on that responsibility, which is understandable. But very simply, we need the presence initially. The responsibility of the state chapters are contingent upon how many people you have to help. I would say the responsibilities, we can talk about this more when Gilbert comes on. Essentially, we need the web presence initially with someone taking questions and available to interact with people in their region. And then as time moves forward, based on how much time each individual has that's organizing this, move into events and larger order issues. Obviously, Zeitgeist Day 2010 is a big one, and I'm going to bring that point up as far as the New York event here in a moment. And then the last three quarters, we're going to talk to Neil Kerneman, who runs V Radio, which is another radio show that talks about the Venus Project explicitly. And he's been very dedicated doing all sorts of work. He's worked with Jacques and Roxanne directly, and a very well-informed individual. So we're going to talk about what he's doing. I want to promote his show too, and we need more voices for the movement and everything. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to speak with him. Now, there's a few things I wanted to run down. I already mentioned Zeitgeist Day. It's the Zeitgeist Day in New York City 2010. I'm attempting to do a Venus Project Symposium. There's a building that I was just recently looking at that I'm in talks with, which would allow about 4,000 square feet of space. And there's many different avenues that can be taken for this. It could be very, very exciting. Set of teams would be developed for this. I'm not going to say too much about it because I haven't had a chance to get all the fine details arranged with Jacques and Roxanne, but I'm very excited about this occurring. Basically, the idea is to have a major event, Zeitgeist Day, and then the next day, or 2 days following, perhaps, the weekend, meaning March 12th, 13th, and 14th, we have a large-scale symposium open to the public with a lot of media, a lot of information, rotating lectures, guest speakers, whatever we can do. It's very ambitious, but I think it has to be done. I think it could be very, very effective. The press would be all over it. It could be very unique, especially if we can get other people from other countries to contribute in various ways. And again, I'll go over that as we move forward. But I'm very much looking forward to that, and I think it's going to happen one way or another, either on a small scale or hopefully a large scale. On a similar note, we're still working with the media project. The people, unfortunately, have day jobs, as everyone knows, so the media project is being constructed by volunteers, and it's contingent upon their free time. So that's going to be happening very soon. I'm looking very much forward to that. Unfortunately, it just takes a lot of time to create these types of back-end systems. From Earth to Venus, that's the other project for the creative team. There's a forum post that I'm reviewing. We have a lot of great feedback on this project. I'm not going to go into too much detail. In fact, I already have in the last radio show, as far as a structural redesign of the planet, as ambitious as that might sound, which can both be as a creative thought exercise and hopefully through time will also have a very tangible relevance as well. Point being, we should start somewhere. For more details on that, go to the forum and find the forum post from Earth to Venus, request for help ideas. And what else is there? The Venus Project has been in El Salvador for the past 2 days. I haven't gotten much feedback on that, but I think they're doing well. I know Jacques got an award in Mexico as well. They'll be back in the States later this week, and I'll have them on, of course, on the next radio show. But it's great that they're continuing to get the exposure that they have. It seems to be moving very quickly, and lots of interest is developing, almost exponentially, it seems. I am going to be giving a lecture at the Maharishi University of Management, which should be very interesting, on November 15th at 7:30 in Dolby Hall, if anyone's in the Midwest. Coincidentally, actually, Jacques Fresco and Roxanne will be in Ohio on the same during the same period, which I wasn't even aware of, but I thought that was that was interesting. Too bad the Midwest has such terrible transportation, being just a few states away. But nevertheless, this event in Maharishi University should be very interesting. There'll be two events, actually. On Sunday, I'll give a formal lecture, which is part 2 of the lecture that was given in London. The initial lecture was called Where Are We Now?, which detailed the monetary system and touched upon some issues regarding science in human behavior, which is more of an addition. And then I'm going to pick up with that subject in the new lecture, which will be entitled very simply, Where Are We Going?, which is going to show some trend models about some patterns that are developing, both positive and negative, highlighting essentially the need that we, one way or another, have to move into a different direction. And of course, I'm going to go into transition ideas. Essentially, I wasn't going to do any more lectures until the third film was out, but since I have this information at my fingertips, and I have a good friend that goes to school at Maharishi University, I decided to make a trip, and we might as well make a nice deal out of it. It should be very interesting. It's a very unique, progressive school, and I'm looking forward to chatting with the people there. There will also be an informal Q&A with me on November 16th at the Student Union Theater. So if you're in the Midwest, if you're in the, well, that's a bit broad, isn't it? Because, as I said, you can't get very far in the Midwest just because you're there without, sweating it out on a bus for many, many hours. But nevertheless, if you are in Ohio, please check it out. This is not ticketed in any way. It's going to be restricted to fire code. I have no idea how many people to expect. But if you do have questions, if you're coming from a long distance, you might want to get in touch with me beforehand, because I don't want people to come from long distances and then, due to fire code reasons, not be able to get in. But then again, we might be fine. I don't know what the response is going to be. But nevertheless, that is that. And I think that's about it as far as news. And in about 20 minutes, I'm going to bring on Andrew Buxton. So in the meantime, and as I think I had mentioned last time, I'm still going to be doing questions with everybody. I'm not stopping the questions. So after every broadcast, whoever posts the questions in the forum, the request for questions in the forum, please continue to do so, because while I might not be able to go through all questions, as I usually can't anyway, I still enjoy getting the questions and will still address them in between guests. And again, very often I'll probably have shows where there are no guests, and I'll simply go back into questions as well, apart from attempting to do other content-based topics, which I intend to do as well. In other words, I will speak about something very, very specific for a period of time, as opposed to just bouncing off these questions. But the questions have been very effective, and the knowledge base is slowly being created in the back end, utilizing these questions and the answers. And I want to thank the transcription team, the radio show transcription team, for the tremendous work of having to go through my garbled speech to create something cogent and publishable. It's actually extremely helpful as I've gone through it, because many of the answers are already there. I just have to clean them up and get them into the knowledge database. And that's about it. So let me go through these questions. Number 1, this is a long one, so bear with me. Question, Peter, granted in a resource-based economy, everyone would have access to the necessities of life for free. Do you think there will be a place for collector's items to be bought, sold, traded in some form? Although it seems obvious that often the motive of labeling something as a collector's edition DVD is usually a marketing tactic, I'm referring to something more along the lines of an object with historical value, such as a coin collection, or something that is viewed as valuable for sentimental reasons rather than usefulness. And let me go through and look at the rest of this question. In other words, even though the Zeitgeist Orientation movie does a good job of explaining that what we want is accessible rather than property, right? How much room will there be for people still being able to call something mine? Well, that's a very interesting question. Well, let's assume someone has a set of rare coins. Is it really a good idea for them just to hoard it to themselves? It has no monetary value at this stage. It has an intrinsic antique value, meaning there is a scarcity element there. And by the way, when we talk about eliminating scarcity, we're very much aware of the novelty of general human creation. But it's the value system change, it's the reorientation of these issues. Money plays such an incredible role in art. Millions of dollars for a painting by Picasso. In the future, these paintings will be accessible just as they are today through museums. A coin collection would be shown. I think it's a very complex question. I don't exactly know the answer, but all I can say is that anybody who wants to hoard their items and restrict them from somebody else will be essentially in in, if you will, an ethical violation of the way the system basically is condoned. And I think through time that tendency will absolutely vanish. It's a very minor issue. I know precisely what you mean, and it's a complex issue. Anything that's rare should be made available to the public in the sense that it can be seen, viewed. The public isn't going to care to own it because they can't do anything with it, because most of these issues are sentimental. They're not really functional utility. You know, say your mother made you something. In our culture today, sentiment, excuse my last truncated sentence, in our culture, sentiment is a very big thing, and it's obviously a cultural phenomenon based on attachments to each other. And I think that there will be a natural respect for things like that. Why would someone steal the sweater that your grandmother knitted for you? What are they going to do with it? So, you know, I hope that answers your question. It's an interesting, complex question. To summarize, I think valuable items that are intrinsically rare will either be duplicated for everyone to share in some form. For example, you don't find reel-to-reels by the Beatles being sold like paintings, while collectors might buy things like this. No one really cares that much to listen to the original reel-to-reel of a Beatles song. They get reproductions of it, such in DVD form, CD form, and that exact same process can be done with pieces of art. You can reproduce art, prints. To have the original is really a form of arrogance or a form of sentiment. And on the level of sentiment, well, I think to each his own, and the world will most likely evolve. Maybe problems could arise, but most likely the society will evolve to have a general respect for whatever sentimental objects people have. Again, this is based on access. How often do you run into somebody that has something that's of their sentimental value that you want outside of the interest of maybe its monetary value? There could be neuroses in there, but I hope that point is clear. Number 2, hello, Peter. Recently a friend gave me a book to read. After finishing it, I couldn't help but feel that the Zeitgeist Movement, Fresco's ideas, and your ideas was modeled after this book, Walden 2, by B.F. Skinner. Understanding that this is a fictional book, I am against the idea of planning the interests and likes of a child to make them into a genius of a specific discipline, but I think it has great ideas other than that. I bought a reissue copy for myself to hand out, which came with a commentary by B.F. Skinner in 1976. Okay, let me paraphrase. He gives a quote here. I'll read it. And, well, first of all, to stop you right now, at Walden 2, of course, B.F. Skinner was extremely brilliant in many ways. There are always controversial notions to a lot of people that have that type of perspective on human behavior, and some of them go a little bit too far, I think, but that's subjective. Nevertheless, Jacques Fresco, I believe, has Skinner's book on his reading list. I know he has some of them, and I'm sure he has read Walden too. In fact, I believe he mentioned it to me. But let me go ahead and read the commentary that you said struck you in an odd way. Quote from the book: "An important theme within Walden 2 is that political action is to be avoided. Historians have stopped writing about wars and conquering heroes and empires, and what they have turned to instead, though far less dramatic, is far more important. The great cultural revolutions have not started with politics. The great men who have said to have made a difference in human affairs, Confucius, Buddha, Jesus, and scholars and scientists of the revival of learning and leaders of the Enlightenment, Marx, were not political leaders, but they did not change history by running for office. Excuse me. We need to aspire to their eminence in order to profit from their example. What is needed is not a new political leader or a new kind of government, but further knowledge in human behavior and new ways of applying that knowledge to the design of cultural practices." And let me make sure that, yes, I'm going to stop right there just to save time. That was a quote from B.F. Skinner's Walden 2. That's one of his commentaries. And I think most people listening that follow this movement would have to be very much in line with that section of this quote. That is precisely why I've talked about the detachment from politics. Politics can have a basis. Obviously, in the end, there will be political influence in such a transition. There would have to be, because we have to engage the political establishment. But I think Skinner's point is absolutely correct. And that's why I always bring up Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the American Civil Liberties Movement. They weren't using the political system. They did gauge and influence the system by all means. But I think Skinner actually is very correct in that statement. Now, let me make sure I finish the rest of your question. Yes, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and that's basically my thoughts on it for now. So I hope that that helps. Skinner was a brilliant guy, and I will be using some of his research in the new film. So number 3. My friend says without money we wouldn't have our current state of technology, and without money inventors can't acquire the resources they need to invent because there are not enough resources for everyone to be inventing things with. He points to cultures like Native Americans who have a resource-based economy and did not advance as far technologically as proof that technology is the result of money. What is your response to this? That's a very common disposition. I've heard that quite a bit. Let's see here. The Native American comparison is a little limited because they've never progressed their society. They haven't had the influence to progress their society in the way that we already have. I believe money, of course, has had a motivating factor by all means. There's been a great deal of progress in the scientific community because of money inherently, but that's not necessarily why that progress has been assumed. In fact, I think one of the greatest examples I had seen recently was a trend analysis of technology trends done by Ray Kurzweil in a presentation I have, where he talks about economic shifts and in scientific invention, the what he calls the exponential increase of technological and scientific advancement. And very simplistically, if you look at the patterns, the way he sets these models up, the big booms and busts of our economy in America have done absolutely nothing to alter scientific invention, in fact. Scientific invention comes from somewhere else. While there's a motivation to produce things for money and profit, which can move people quickly along and investigate certain things, you'll tend to find the greatest scientists, the greatest contributions have never had that interest. Some people were a little more establishment than others. Benjamin Franklin obviously was a rather establishment type. But nevertheless, science will continue to move forward regardless. I think even if the world was broke, in other words, I think even if the entire American economy collapsed, I think scientific ingenuity would move forward very, very rapidly. There might be a limitation of tools, but there's nothing historically to show that this exponential increase in technology and artificial intelligence has any wane because of economic influence. And I think that's been relatively clear in the activist orientation guide. I think you mentioned your friend says this. Well, again, there is a disposition. I would respond to your friend by saying basically what I just said, and also point out the fact that most of the great inventors that we've always had really had no interest, at least they showed no general interest in their writings or anything else. They are more philosophical in a lot of ways, actually, such as Albert Einstein or Louis Pasteur or even Charles Darwin. There's many of them I can go off. I don't have them in front of me. Great scientific minds are driven by something very powerful and has nothing to do with money. Look at Mr. Fresco. Even my own personal interests and the limited range I have with hands-on scientific interests, though I can find comparable interests I have, which I would consider scientific in nature, such as the many, many, many years I've spent in musical interest in studying music and the science of music and sound and physics and the overtone series and intonations. I did that because of a deep interest in the subject matter, not because of money. I believe it's difficult to assume that money, elimination of money would eliminate incentive at this stage because of what you see around you, but I have no doubt in my mind that science will progress much more rapidly once the limitations aren't there. Money poses limitations, not ability. Only in this system does money propose ability, but in the larger scheme, money is based on limitations. So if you have a council of people that have a great scientific idea and the public becomes aware of it, they don't budget out money to this organization to help, say, a medical idea or a research project. It's just given to them to the highest extent that's physically possible based on the intelligent management of the Earth's resources. If someone's studying the cure for a disease, they don't have to get a budget of money. This is a restriction. This is a hindrance in our culture. So it would just be done. In fact, I could see the curing of so many different illnesses almost, well, that's a big stretch, but I really believe that the monetary system restricts our abilities, especially in the realm of science, quite literally, meaning that the more we use money, the more it's restrictive. So I hope that's clear. And yeah, there's other things I could say, but I'm not going to. Number 4. Hey, Peter, could you briefly walk us through the process which you create your films? I would like to start doing a film on language and the like. Okay, well, this isn't really a movement question, but since you asked that, very simply, you do the research. My research comes from audio, video to books, primarily books, magazines, articles, periodicals. And then what I typically do when I find subject matter I like, I copy everything out manually. When you write something down physically with a pencil, it seems to have a interesting cognitive reaction in your mind. I'm a thorough writer. I do everything in physical writing. And I copy everything out that I find relevant, then I begin a process of recopying. When I make a film, I start with about 30 notebooks derived from all my sources, and I slowly break all of that down through rewriting, recopying, condensing, making it as concise as possible to about one notebook. All my books are riddled with notes and everything else. So what I could say is that when you do begin work, use your writing capacity. It really helps to get things in your mind, as opposed to, well, that's the system that I use. It might not work for somebody else. I don't want to talk too much about that, but that's how you get it into your brain, is through actually physically writing and speaking too. I talk a lot to myself, which probably makes me look insane, but it's all about internalizing information so you really understand it. And of course, you obviously have to follow your sources too. And that's a very difficult one. I still get attacked, of course, for Zeitgeist 1 because no one out there will follow the sources to see where things came from. They just assume it's all made up for certain elements. You follow the sources, you'll find exactly where things are. So make sure you track your sources if you want to be thorough, if you're doing something in a scientific sense. Zeitgeist 3, if you will have a companion, which will be entirely sourced. In fact, eventually all the films will have companions that will be free with the full sourcing. I just don't have time to do it, as it's obviously seen. Okay, 3 minutes before I bring on Andrew, let me do one more quick question. Hey, Peter, I was wondering why the Q&A from the July 25th lecture hasn't been uploaded. Oh, it's uploaded. It's just not in a high-quality form. I didn't do the shooting on that. It was done by a third party. But the webcast is there. If you go to, I believe it's on the main YouTube Zeitgeist Movement site. If you go to the audio video page and click through, you'll go to our main site, and then you should find the Q&A in the webcast post that's broken into, I think, 7 or 8 parts. It's actually broken into, I think, 15 or 16 parts with the entire presentation, then the Q&A following. But you'll see it there, and you can hear it. I just haven't had time, and I believe someone was going to send me a higher res version of that. I just haven't had time to do much with it. The Q&A wasn't really my priority, but I will do my best to get back on that. There's just so much going on. And one more question before I bring on Andrew. Number 6, do you think the Zeitgeist Movement lacks an emotional aspect? Could this be related to the disproportion of males and females? If there is one, can you provide more statistics? That's a very interesting question. Well, I don't really think about it or really care. I don't think it lacks an emotional aspect. If there's more males and females, I'm not sure what to say about that. I don't have the statistics for that. In the main, we don't care about that distinction, so we don't track it. I'm not quite sure what to say about that, honestly. I meet lots of females that seem to be interested. I think when it comes to activism, and there are some more aggressive, I guess, masculine gestures that are associated sometimes inadvertently with the movement. There's cultural aspects that have come from strange areas that have kind of merged in, but luckily they're adapting, and they might be a little bit more on the masculine side. But I'm not sure how to answer that question, but that's an interesting point. If I can find those stats, I'll review them. Okay, let me hunt down Andrew over here. Andrew? Okay, that's not Andrew. Either that or I can't hear him. I've been nervous about dealing with this switchboard with people calling in through Skype, which is what they're doing. But let me see. Okay, we're going to wait a moment. I don't believe Andrew's back with us. Let me continue going through this. Sorry about this, guys. It's a little ambiguous when you use this particular service that I do. Okay, we're going to move on to more questions then, because I'm not confident that I see him there. Number 7. In my personal experience with many people with deep religious beliefs, which are conditioned to the point that their religious views are so ingrained and embedded into their mind that it would take a lifetime to re-educate or recondition them. If someone takes offense by some of the ideas of the Zeitgeist Movement, i.e. religion, they are likely to reject other ideas or completely ignore them altogether. What are your comments on this? Well, let me give you my comment on that. I think there is going to always be something that certain groups are going to be offended by. As most know, both Jacques and I will speak about religion very candidly. It's not that we're against people. I look at religion as clothing. I do not look down upon anybody with a particular religious view. I see it as just another part of their conditioning, and that's basically it. That's really what it comes down to. So on that level, I do my best to engage people as politely as I can. But, obviously there's relationships with the movement from the first film that some people have been in lieu of, some people have been very happy by. I've had people that have overcome their religion entirely because of that film. Then other people are just simply offended. Most that just tend to want to be offended by anyone that is criticizing their beliefs, and that's the end of it. They might not have the capacity at this point, the maturity to be able to engage the ideas in and of themselves. And that's a broad statement, it's a bold statement, but I think we've been very candid about our disposition on religion, especially in a positive way too, as I've talked about before. Now, at the end of the activist orientation guide, we talk about the reciprocal nature, the golden rule, if you will, and I think the Venus Project really represents these issues very, very cleanly. Even in Zeitgeist Addendum, where I bring up George Carlin and I bring up these other notions that have these unique views that are not establishment religion, but they are so-called spiritual nonetheless, I think it's important that everyone take these into account. Honestly, I think we're very positive on religion in the broadest extent, but naturally I'm against the superstition because that's very limiting both socially and personally. So let me see if I have Andrew here once again.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Andrew.
How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, good.
I'm glad I finally got you on here because I was a little spooked out. I keep seeing strange numbers pop up, but good to hear your voice.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having us on.
What's that?
I said thanks for having us on.
Oh, no problem. You might want to speak fairly slowly. I think the signal is a little shaky. I can hear you fairly well, but I'm not sure how it's coming through live. But essentially, before we begin with the projects that you were talking about, why don't you give the audience a little background about yourself and about the people that you're working with, most specifically, the design team and your associations with the Movement UK, or whatever else you would like to say as far as your history and your team.
Okay, well, basically I've come from a construction background myself on the design side of things. So working in AutoCAD, doing designs for electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, etc. Been doing that about 18 years. Sort of found the Venus Project through Zeitgeist, the Addendum film, which was a bit of an eye-opener for us. And from there found obviously the Venus Project, and we started the UK project within a few weeks of finding out about the Venus Project.
Excellent. And you've met with, you were actually helping Jacques and Roxanne when they're in the UK, so you guys have had many meetings on a lot of the subjects that you're about to talk about, And of course, to me, they've spoken very, very highly of the projects that you've been condoning. Who is actually in your team, if I might ask? What are the central players you have happening with the? First of all, the name isn't the UK project anymore, correct? What is the name of the project?
Well, basically, it started off as the UK project, which was going to be pretty much almost a copy of the Venus project, to be honest with you.
Sure.
We loved the idea of it, and we thought, maybe we can do something like this in the UK. After a few sort of long discussions with Jack and Roxanne about this, they made it pretty clear that this wasn't something that they were particularly fond of. The idea of people going off and making their own kind of cities. Obviously we've got a lot of awakening to do, if you like, worldwide,
right.
Get people prepared for it. So after sort of long discussion, we kind of come to an agreement that we would actually make a global CAD team, or like a design agency, if you like, that we could take, for example, Jack's sketches and turn them into two-dimensional CAD drawings, engineering drawings, etc. This obviously seemed a lot better to them, so we went ahead and made the UK project as a design database, really.
Right, and what's the website?
Well, we've actually changed now. It was the UK project. We've now changed to it's www.thevenusprojectdesign.com.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah. Basically, when we changed over from our initial mission statement kind of thing, Jack and Roxanne asked us to change the name to something more in line with the Venus project rather than an external organisation, if you like.
That's great. Why don't you describe to the audience what exactly you guys are doing as far as the volunteers and the very nature of the organization?
Right. Well, the Venus project design now, we've got 3 projects running really at the moment. The main project for us has always been the development of a global database for all scientific, technical, architecture, all the different scientific and technical jobs, including CGI, graphic, 3D CGI work, etc. So all those sort of professionals. So that database is growing quite well now. Obviously, if there's anyone in the Zeitgeist Movement that's got scientific or technical experience, professional or by all means come over and sign up on the volunteer database. The other 2 projects we've got are Earth 2.0 movie and the World Will Be One, which is the main Hollywood type style motion picture that we're doing for Jack and Roxanne.
Yes, that's fantastic, and I think I've seen great feedback on those initial trailers that have been posted for Earth 2.0. That looks like a very promising project. I certainly look forward to that. I think many people are. Going back to the database that you were talking about how how many people do you have so far in your database?
At the moment, we've got around 470 technical scientific professionals. So that's worldwide. So.
Well, that's fantastic, and I think I'll begin to promote that more so. In fact, I think it would be a great resource for anyone. Obviously, from the movement, I would like to promote that for you, so people know where to go. I've given a number of different experimental thoughts to making a database of people. In fact, we've been trying to do that with our current users. Searchable user interfaces where people can find like-minded skill sets, but it hasn't really caught on yet. But that's fantastic. So anybody out there that has the expertise of what he's just described, paraphrasing, what he's just described, please contact Andrew through the VenusProjectDesign.com. Is that what you said it was?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, and the CGI you guys are working on has been very expansive. I don't want to give too much of that away, but essentially describe in the simplistic terms what you're doing with these models as far as the cities or anything you'd like to express as far as the internals of the project. Obviously, the 2 movies are very important, but for people listening that have 3D expertise or CAD expertise, that would be the most incorporated idea for right now, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, at the moment, we're taking all of Jack's sketches. There's around 2,100, something like that,
Wow.
sketches that Jack's done, and he continues doing them daily. So,
yes, he does.
we'll get sort of like 6 months, 12 months down the project, and he'll have another couple of thousand for us. But but yeah, we're basically taking the sketches, turning them into two-dimensional CAD drawings as much as possible, and then they go off to the 3D CGI guys who do the modelling from that. At the moment, we're working on one circular city design. I think it's for about 10,000 population. It's going quite well. We've probably got about 30% of the city modelled now. Just doing all the landscaping at the moment, while the other guys are doing the models for the architecture, the houses and some of the geothermal plants and things like this.
Right.
So it's coming well. But we'll be using these 3D in all of the movie projects. And obviously, you're welcome to use them in the Zeitgeist movies and stuff.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Well, I look forward to seeing them. I've always been really hoping to see most of Fresco's work get into the CGI world. Obviously, there were some that were done years ago, but once we have that and these models can be created, people can get a much more personal sense of what it would be like to be in these cities. Obviously, just looking at the circular city as the photographs and the models have shown, it doesn't give a personal sense. So I understand that you have views that will be from inside the city where people can get a sense of what it would be like to actually be in this type of environment. And I think that's a very well needed aesthetic for a lot of people out there,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment we're working on externals, so we're just doing the externals of all the buildings and the city designs, because I think we're going to be doing multiple city designs. So we'll do some sea cities, some circular cities, etc.
Well, that's great.
Until such a time as we've got a full script for both of the movies and storyboarding, etc. It's very difficult to tell what will actually need modelling in really high detail, sort of internals and things.
Right.
But that's definitely on the line. It's one of the things that we will be working towards.
Sure. Well, go ahead and talk about Earth 2.0 a bit. Who are the directors on that, and what's the timetable for that?
Okay, so the director for Earth 2.0 is a guy called Frank Da Silva, who's actually working very closely with us in all aspects of both movies, and he'll be directing both movies. The cinematographer, or the main cinematographer, is a guy called Mark Walters, a very talented young man. And so the Earth 2.0 project, it's the way we've sort of worked this out from a financial standpoint is in order to do the world will be one movie. It's quite a large project. I mean, even though we're doing the CGI or the majority of the CGI for free, it's a big project. So one of the main ways we're looking at funding that is by doing a lower budget first movie called Earth 2.0, which will be a sort of lower budget kind of documentary, if you like, but done in a unique style. And the idea behind it is, well, I've got a synopsis here if you'd like to hear that.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so as we enter the second decade of the 21st century, humanity faces challenges our species has never encountered before. Technology promises to solve climate change, population expansion, food shortages, crime, disease, poverty, economic collapse and sectarian conflict. However, relatively few scientists are currently investigating solutions that will improve the living conditions of most people. If we're going to survive, we need to upgrade our approach to life on Earth. Earth 2.0 will seek out experts in every field, including social engineers, biologists, botanists, technologists, psychologists, futurists and inventors. What questions does humanity need to address? What have we learned about in the world in the last 100 years that might help us navigate the future? How did our ancestors deal with similar challenges in the distant past? Have ancient societies anything to teach us about our predicament? 2 seconds, just on to the next page. Jacques Fresco, social engineer, futurist and the brilliant mind behind the Venus Project, insists that we must prepare for the changes to come. In his view, if the structure of society should fall, we must be ready to take the opportunity to upgrade every possible facet of our civilization. With cutting-edge cinematography, stunning visual effects and inspiring musical score, Earth 2.0 will take the audience on a sometimes controversial journey beyond New Age notions of the future. All concepts, ideas and theories will be expressed in language that's readily accessible and easy to understand. The makers of Earth 2.0 want to avoid the use of jargon and technical terms. In our view, it's vitally important that this information reach as wide an audience as possible. The Earth 2.0 movie documentary is a sobering examination of the future of humanity. This film argues that we've reached a point where we must upgrade our approach to life on this planet or face the prospect of hard times ahead. That's pretty much it.
That sounds fantastic. What is the target completion date for that film?
Ideally, a year to 18 months, possibly 2 years maximum. You know, the idea is that obviously we're going to use this to help fund the main motion picture movie.
Right.
So yeah. So two big projects, but we'll get there.
No, that's extremely ambitious, of course. And if for those listening that aren't familiar, the title "The World Will Be One" is a synopsis title by Fresco regarding a major motion picture as a form of social therapy, in his words, where we need to get a film out there that's not in the underground, that's not like Zeitgeist, for example, but it's actually out there in the mainstream in a highly visual way, so the public at large, millions and millions of people in the public domain, can see it and, of course, draw much more attention to this project. And it really gives people the insight of what it would be like to live and all the fears. As you know, Andrew, there's lots of bizarre fears and knee-jerk reactions when anyone speaks of the type of system that we talk about. But this film could show the life of people in the system, and that's very, very important. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jacques, obviously, while we had Jacques staying with us for the London tour that they did, obviously we had many a night sitting here and talking about the film, etc. And the storyline that he's got for it is absolutely fantastic. You know, perfect Hollywood-style movie.
Right.
I think everyone will really enjoy it. You know, from all levels. You know, people that haven't heard of the Venus Project to people that are well versed in it.
Yes, absolutely. And the style is very conducive, as some would understand. You know, most Hollywood films have a particular recipe. So the real trick is to create a film that has the typical recipe, you know, the relationships and all the things that we tend to see repeatedly in these films, because unfortunately things are very regimented in people's minds these days, and then bring in the concepts of the Venus Project underneath it. And I think, as I agree with you, Jacques' script in the synopsis that I've also been made aware of definitely caters to that. So it's almost as though people, it becomes familiar to them, but they have no idea that they're seeing something that's absolutely foreign at the same time, if you know what I mean. So it's a brilliant idea. It's fantastic you guys are working with that. Who is it the same team doing Earth 2.0 as will be The Earth Will Be One, more or less, or do you not know at this point?
Yeah. As far as we're aware, that's what we're looking at doing, yeah, using the same team. Obviously, the teams, we're very much in the early stages of all of this, so, you know, we're kind of building up a team of you know, experts in each of their fields, kind of thing. So, right. I think we'll probably end up using both, you know, using both teams, yeah.
Good.
Well, both projects, sorry. Right.
Well, that's fantastic. And you guys work with the Zeitgeist Movement UK as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Heather and Tom from Heather Oden and Tom Williams from Zeitgeist UK work directly with us on all the film-related stuff. So the other team members, I suppose the core team members, we've got Richard Laverick. He's a UK entrepreneur, lives up north in the UK, so he's dealing with all the sort of business side of things. We've got Frank and Mark, they're obviously dealing with the setting up of the production teams for the film. Heather and Tom deal with all the stuff like management, events,
right.
You know, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a good little crew of us sort of building up now.
Oh, it's fantastic. Now, the response from the UK overall has been fantastic, especially in London, more so than we tend to find in the States, oddly enough, at this stage. There's just a general media response that's a little bit more concentrated, a little bit more professional. But it's interesting how that's worked out. So that's fantastic. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's all really. Just obviously, if there's anyone that's from a sort of scientific or technical point of view, profession, then come and join us on the www.thevenusprojectdesign.com. Same for anyone that's into 3D CGI. Come along and join up on the volunteers database.
Fantastic. And I will also. You should send me a small graphics that I can put on the main site, so people can know about this immediately, because I think it's a very important arm of everything for people with this expertise to join together. As you know, there's a media project that's being done, which is a much broader concept, which hopefully this can be promoted within the media project that we're doing as well. So anything I can do to help, let me know, Andrew.
Okay, brilliant.
All right, well, take care. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. And that was Andrew Buxton from the UK, doing great work over there. And we have about 10 minutes before I bring on Gilbert, who's been helping us with the chapters. And intermittently, I'm going to go back to questions. I kind of like this new pace. Let's see. I think we're on question 7. Here we go. Hi, Peter. Would it be plausible to use one of Jacques' basic designs for a simple mass-produced house shelter to produce them and distribute them around the world, start the transition by housing everyone on the planet? It's very interesting that you bring that up. There is a thing that Jacques did, I think 30 years ago, if not longer, called a trend home. And it was a prefabricated home that he invented, which was extremely low cost. I believe it used recycled materials. If you go to the archives of the Venus Project, I believe they have this in there. They have all of these news archives. It probably is labeled, actually. I'm not going to punch it up right now, but look into the trend home, and you'll find a very interesting example of pretty much exactly what you're describing. He wanted to make a very low-cost house that was prefabricated, not prefabricated in the sense that you see these homes today, these really cheap trailer park type homes, but something that actually had a great deal of integrity, a great deal of strength, an extremely low cost, unbelievable efficiency, a brilliant invention. Just out of curiosity, you should go and check that out. Find the Trend Home by Jacques Fresco. But back to your larger point, I completely agree with that. I would love to see something like that happen. That's the thing, though. If it's not profitable, it tends not to happen. Where do you find the initial money to do that, and how do you maintain support for such an issue in the sea of profitability that we have now? The problem is the initial resources that would need to be obtained to make it in bulk enough to have the deal on the resources. In other words, let me say that more clearly. In order to get the resources, the amount of resources needed to make so many things to make it cheap, buying things in bulk is invariably cheaper, you'd have to have a great deal of money initially to do something like that. These are the types of things that the United Nations, if they really cared, would be thinking about. They wouldn't be worrying about the monetary programs that they assume in and of themselves. They would actually create establishment systems, They'd actually create factories. They would actually build things for the purpose of these types of issues. They would build factories to produce homes for people at a very, very low cost, prefabricated, very simple. They would build extrusion technology factories, which would bring out extruded food full of all the nutrients that the 1 billion people that are starving on this planet could actually utilize. And all of it, once they set that system up, it would be so inexpensive to maintain, and it would actually do a great deal. These are things I will be talking about in more financial detail when I talk about the transition in the third film. Because if you get the money down there, you begin to see how, when you realize the money that is wasted on the bureaucracy on a pseudo-profit system known as the non-profit charity organizations that are out there. There are many great meaning organizations, but very often they are so corrupted, for lack of a better expression, by the fact that they have to maintain their own establishments with money. Anyway, so that's a terrific question. I strongly suggest looking into Fresco's Trend Home. We have 5 more minutes before Gilbert comes on. Number 8. What if a person still enjoys drugs, alcohol, pop culture, etc.? Can they actually call themselves members of the movement and be in advocation of it in your mind? That's a strange question. This culture is riddled with people that have various addictions, not only chemical addictions, but all sorts of other neuroses, addictions. that are just they seem to just keep growing. They're products of the system, their tendencies. I'm not anybody can call themselves a member of the movement if they believe in the central tenets. We all have general weaknesses in some ways. We've all been compromised in some way by the system. We're all prostituting ourselves for money in some form, one way or another, regardless of how altruistic it might seem. We do our best to keep it at a matter of degree. At least that's what I do. I'm forced into lots of things that I don't care to do, but I have to because of the monetary system. Regarding drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, I mean these are small notions of people's lives. Just because they enjoy things like that, well, they'll begin to assess why they enjoy it and the real reasoning behind it. There's nothing wrong with casual use of anything in moderation, but there's a larger issue with these issues with addiction. There's a larger issues with the psychological reasons for rampant recreational drug use. People that do drugs every single day or they drink every single day. These are psychological problems, and then they develop chemical dependencies. But it has an origin. I'd like to get Jacques on one day to talk about the alcoholics he used to work with, curing people of alcoholism in regard to this point. But to make everything very simple, anyone can be a member of this movement as long as they agree with what we're talking about and they understand the direction or in support of it, in support of moving out of this particular social structure in favor of something new. And they're not hell-bent on maintaining some old establishment notion or some old neuroses. They have to be willing to change. Everyone has to be willing to change. That's really the prerequisite. Some people say, well, build it and I will come. Build the city, then I'll live there. No, it's not going to work like that. People have to participate and have to become a part of this. Number 9. How would you assure people that if they support this movement that it would not become something that you see in science fiction movies? The movie Logan's Run comes to mind from the 70s. It was far-fetched then, but maybe not now. Even without the monetary system, wouldn't people still seek power or dominion over others? Power comes in many forms and not always money-based. Well, this is true. Power does come in many forms, but the prerequisite for power is the reward for corrupt behaviors due to power. So, in other words, if you don't have a reward mechanism in society that rewards someone being given a lot of power, in other words, you remove the notion of power almost entirely, and in the larger scheme of the system that we talk about, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's based on the education of the population. I believe that if monetary power, of course, is the most transparent. There are other power neuroses. There are egotistic things that are there, which are, of course, cultural manifestations as well. And just as easily as they came in through time, just as easily they can go out. Even though I don't think people would seek dominion or power over each other. I don't think that would be some knee-jerk commonality inside the system we talk about. In the transition, we're going to have all sorts of problems like that. In the transition, you have to understand that you look at two cultures. You have what's a good example here? If you were to take someone right now from a hunter-gatherer Amazonian rainforest and drop them in the middle of New York City, they don't know the language, they don't have the clothes, they don't have the patterns of behavior whatsoever. Obviously, it would take a good deal of time to get them to slowly come around and adapt to the cultural attributes that would make them, quote, normal in our Western world. That is basically what we're dealing with. We're dealing with two different cultures. One that is right now in theory, if you will, but I think based on absolute essentials of life and technological inference as far as what we're capable of doing. And we're basically currently a primitive culture that's attempting to transition into an advanced culture. Now, you can nitpick about those terms. Is Western society really more advanced than someone living in the Amazonian rainforest? Depends on your frame of reference. Depends on the necessity of the society. A small hunter-gatherer society that has understood the carrying capacity of the earth and they are dealing in balance with their environment, I would say is equally as advanced in a certain sense as our Western world, if not more, because they're aware of their environment. Western world has become too exasperated. We don't share, we exploit. We don't. It's based on the narrow self-interest, lost cooperative interest. So in the end, we're making a transition of culture. Think about it that way. and it is 4 o'clock, and I believe I see Gilbert, so let me bring him on right now. Gilbert, are you there? Evidently not.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
There you are. Hey, yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. Sorry, I was just clicking down the Blockhog Radio show, which was on live, and I think a bit laggy. So sorry for that.
Yeah, there is latency on there.
I get.
So it's great to have you on, Gilbert. In fact, it's great to actually be able to talk with you personally as well. We haven't had a chance to actually talk one-on-one, only through chats. So before we jump into all the chapter stuff you're doing, why don't you give the audience a little background about yourself, where you're calling from, and how you kind of got interested in the movement and anything of relevance as such.
Okay, it sounds like a good idea. Well, where to start? Perhaps maybe a good idea is to dissect my username. Well, you already identified my real name. I'm Gilbert, and I go by Dark Dancer on the forums and on the Ventrilo channel, which is our primary voice chat at the moment. The name comes from, well, Dark. It's kind of racial related. I am from the Netherlands, which is in Europe, Western European country, and I was born in the city of Amsterdam, although I won't bore you with my whole background, so don't worry about that. Basically, I am 21, also one of the younger members of the movement. I study international law. My ethnic origin is in South America and Asia, so kind of mixed background. Basically, I got interested in the movement because I was watching the first movies as well as other research on topics of the same level, and basically I wanted to do something, and I think that's a feeling that everybody has when they're getting in touch with these subjects. So when you announced the Zeitgeist Movement in Addendum, I felt a urgent need to participate in this, and that's basically how I got around here. Well, in daily life, I study international law, like I already mentioned. The second part of my username is Dancer, and that's because I dance salsa, so I'm a very social person aside from all the movement stuff as well. How did I get in touch with the chapters? Well, when I tried to participate in the movement initially, there were a lot of things going on. That's a few months ago, and there's still a lot going on, so perhaps that was not the right way to phrase it. But anyhow, what I was mostly interested in is when you announced that we were going to have regional departments, that you called them chapters at that moment, and that's the name until now. I felt a very large interest in trying to see how this would develop, as it would represent our movement on all local levels. And one thing that I did from there is, when that was progressing but not on a very rapid pace, I decided to organize a meeting of international chapters to bring the international chapters together and have a place to talk. So that's how I got in touch with a lot of chapters, and from there I started to learn to know a lot of people from different parts of the world. We discussed their chapters on a local level and their problems, and well, I experienced that I was able to assist in some cases. So that's how it grew, I guess, from a need to have assistance from the general website to actually try and fulfill that role. So yeah, that's basically a small background.
Yes, that's great, and I want to thank you for doing that, because things have been very scattered in general. I'm always having to deal with chapters personally, and I had yet to come to a point where I could organize them all together. It was always in the back of my mind. And I want to thank you specifically, and also thank everyone out there that has been stepping up to do things that they know are needed that hasn't been personally sanctioned yet by the movement. You know, I get emails constantly of people asking me, you know, what can I do to help? And I do my best to orient them. My daily schedule, of course, is very crazy, And I was really just so pleased that you would actually just take it upon yourself to begin initializing this, which has turned out to be very, very effective. We have these Ventrilo meetings with many, many chapters. I think you mentioned there are many chapters in the last meeting, and there will be one today as well. And I want to announce to everybody that's in a chapter listening that at least one organizer, should be involved in these Ventrilo meetings as they move forward. And larger order issues will be coming up as well. This is a great way to answer questions, a great way to toss around ideas as far as what you think your chapter should be doing. And on that note, actually, Gilbert has been working on a chapter's guide, which I believe has been more or less completed, as you pointed out. I read it. I thought it was great. Have you had a chance to finalize that? And when you do, of course, we're going to post it and make it available to everyone. And it will be an open document as well, because there will always be things to update. But if you want to summarize the chapter's guide or your work with it, whatever you care to relay on that, that'd be great, Gilbert.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, to answer your initial question, the chapter's guide is finalized, but finalized only goes as far because, like you mentioned, it will be readily available to be updated at any point in time. I mean, we're still in the beginning stages of forming the chapters and organizing the whole thing.
Right.
So there will be a lot of additions, but there is a 1.0 version, as you can call it. So any chapter that is currently running or is planning to start a new chapter, that is, of course, in regard to individuals who do not have a chapter in their area yet. And you should check that out before you do, because we had a couple of double requests for people who wanted to start a chapter, but there was already a chapter in their area and they didn't check it. So please do that before. But anyhow, on the topic of the chapters guide, well, basically what I try to do in there, because another very dedicated member named Brandman Flowmore had already started a simple explanation for chapters to create a community on the webpage, and on that note grow into a chapter. But I wanted to make a more specific guide for people who are actually from everywhere around the world, to step-by-step describe what they could do to create a chapter, and also to make sure that people understand the distinction between an official chapter, so to say, and an unofficial chapter, and to emphasize that they're both important, but there might be different expectations with different types of or tiers of chapters. So basically the guide describes the sort of A to Z, or from infant to adult process of how to become a chapter, and will include in the future, of course, expectations and also things that the chapter's administration can do in support for the chapters around the world.
Yes, that's great. And as we denoted, it will be expanded. One thing I've had in the back of my mind is our presentation packages, which will basically give chapters a tool to use in order when they want to make presentations. I have some presentations that are currently available. I'm trying to make more, and of course more material is going to be put out. For example, I have someone proofreading and putting in all the sources for publication my entire lecture from London, which could easily be given to the chapters. It'll be uploaded as well, but the chapters can download this and they can parse the information, and hopefully they can utilize that information for small talks and things that they talk about, anything that they do when they get together to speak of these issues. So a presentation package is something else I have in the works, Gilbert, just so you know that. I think that will be good, because in the end, the chapter relevance comes down to not only meetings, but of course interacting with the public. And I think everyone out there listening that's maintaining the chapter website should really understand that the highest level of this is really engaging your region and pulling in new members. Having the websites is one thing. That's the first stage, and I really appreciate those that are maintaining the web presence, both domestically and internationally. But there has to be larger order events, and of course, Zeitgeist Day of next year, Gilbert, will be a big chapter event, and we can talk more about that and how to find the best way to organize all of these events through all of these chapters. But we also have the issue of progress reports that we were talking about, and I think that's important. Cool. If you want to go into that, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I had no problem with you explaining it either way, but
sure.
Yeah, well, we have it seems kind of double, because we're going to explain it to the listeners right now. But to be clear, I have been emailing with Peter about this idea, so If some of it sounds third person or first person, I apologize for the confusion. But basically, the idea we came up with is that for the official chapters, so chapters that are listed on the Gateway page currently or listed under the chapters registration, we are going to devise a plan that will incorporate chapter progression reports. The basic idea of this is to try to compile the information and events and, well, everything that's progress related or activity related with the chapters, so that we have a good overview of how the chapters are doing, what everybody is facing currently, issue-wise or progress-wise, so that we can compile a document that is to be released periodically and presented to every movement member, so everybody has an idea of what's going on, and that we have an idea of where to assist when needed. So basically, to get a firmer grip on chapter coordination. And on that note, I would like to express, if I may, that it's not the intention to take complete control of the chapters, because everybody is doing this voluntarily, and perhaps some are confused about the fact that there is a chapter administration information, but the basic idea behind it is to support the chapters as much as possible, in contrary to trying to control all the processes. But there is also, of course, a issue of information integrity, which is very important, and that's also something that the chapters administration will take up on itself. So not to meddle in everybody's local business, but more to make sure that the message that's being spread is the right one. So if you would want to add on the chapter's progress report, Peter?
Yes, those are terrific points that you make. Obviously, we have some problems with people doing their own things or creating associations that are basically out of line with what we're doing. And as much as I don't want to have to monitor and restrict chapters, there should be, as you state, a degree of independence, but it also has to maintain the integrity of what we're going for. And that's a very critical thing. And yes, I look forward to these progress reports. We will be talking about this probably. Actually, before I forget, what time is the Ventrilo chapters meeting today?
It will be 1 hour after broadcast. And on that note, perhaps it's a good moment to talk about the meeting time as well.
Sure.
As we have emailed about this, but I have been gauging the opinions of the individual participants to the meeting right now, because it was expressed that for some members it might be better to change the meeting date. But as of now, there is a huge participation that prefers it at this date. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean that we have to change that we have to keep the day here, but that's the current status, and we will change it as need arises.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think I was the one that wanted to change it because of possible scheduling conflicts, but it really just comes down to me organizing my schedule correctly, so that should be completely fine. And does this happen on a weekly basis? As you know, I believe it's every other week, correct? I'm going to the radio show once a week. I suppose maybe twice a month is probably the best idea for the Ventrilo chapters, but maybe in time that will be expanded.
Yes, I agree. I have talked about it with various members a couple of days, because we traditionally always did it after your broadcast, but since you're going weekly right now, I don't think we can keep up with that pace, because as much as every chapter has a lot of things to tell everybody and a lot of issues are handled, I don't think it will be very effective to run the international chapter meeting weekly, because it might be a constraint on everybody's time.
Yes.
And perhaps we will be shy of topics. I don't know. That will probably not be a problem when the movement expands, but as of now, we're keeping it bi-weekly, and when the need arises, then we can always move to a weekly schedule.
Yes, very good. No, I look forward to seeing the expansion of this. As I've stated before, the chapters are very, very critical. The global movement site can only do so much. It has to trickle down, and almost, as I stated before, a holographic type of environment where each subchapter really has a holistic responsibility, and hopefully will gain autonomy in time, where they don't have to always ask. I mean, as you imagine, I get so many emails from chapters of people asking me very simplistic questions, and luckily, as of now, people are, I think, and actually thanks to you, because you've been engaging them more so than I have, because I haven't had the time in such a live capacity, that the questions have trickled down, and we actually have a great set of chapters that are doing a lot of independent work in their regions, which is fantastic. There was also another point you brought up regarding the structure and organization of the chapters. If I could just comment on this, I think the issue really just comes down to the fact that, basically there's, how do I explain it? You have the global level, which is, of course, the global site, and then we move down to the international level, which are all the countries, and then it moves down to a state or territory level, and then it moves down into the cities and towns. And each level becomes the jurisdiction of the official chapter at each point. So in other words, the global chapter is the world official chapter, if you will, which is also the United States global chapter. And then all the states fall under that jurisdiction, while the state chapters under each state come towns. For example, in Canada, we have tons and tons of territories that are falling under the Canadian global site, and they've done a tremendous job. And likewise, if there's any smaller territories, which could be very possible, they would fall under those sub-territories. I hope that makes sense. And do you agree with that, Gilbert? I think that's a good process for this, for organization. It expands responsibility, but I think it's good.
I definitely agree, and I would comment about that a little bit later in the segment. I realize we don't have a lot of time left, but
sure.
I do have some comments left for this topic in the next part of this short half hour.
Oh, sure. Yes,
another thing I would want to address is, as I've talked about information integrity on web pages, what I would like to address is that a lot of emails that I've been getting, and well, like you said earlier, Peter, you've been now noticing a slight decrease from the chapter emails, and yes, I've certainly been having them. So thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
But no problem. I like to do it.
We're going to expand your team as well. I know that there's other people you've been working with that you've denoted to me, and I'm going to make sure that you get a lot more help, because I know that I'm doing the best I can, and you're certainly doing the best you can. But don't worry, we're going to expand. But keep going.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, that's definitely one thing I'm looking forward to as well, because I have been visiting a lot of chapter meetings, and it's not good for my biological clock. But anyhow, what I was what I wanted to tell is the need for quality info on web pages is very important. We've been getting emails from chapters or people who want to start a chapter, and basically the thing that I tell everybody who wants to start a chapter is to take a look at the guide and start up a website. But sometimes when viewing a website, it's very nicely structured and has an awesome template, but it doesn't have the correct information on there. And I just want to express that if your ambition is to be a official chapter for us or represent the movement in your area in whatever way, there is a need for certain topics of information, and that is the understandings, which are very important to the movement and the message we're trying to spread. The graphics is of some importance, but I mean, you don't have to have a flashy website as long as it looks clean and has a similar structure as the website. And make sure you don't have any. I'm sorry that I have to say this, but I have seen a couple of websites who had ridiculous information on them. And please try to keep it as clean as possible, because when I'm reviewing this website, it is very important that the people who come to your webpage get the right impression from the movement right away. So if you're not an official chapter, you have a bit more freedom. But if you're representing us on this local or regional or state level, it's very important. I just wanted to address that really quickly.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and that's something I monitor as well. Not as frequently as I need to. But absolutely, obviously that's a very important thing. I want the chapters to be custom. I don't want them to be just mirrors, especially the websites. In other words, I want there to be an organic quality to them, and there are some great sites out there that are giving regional information, and that's of course very important as well. But no, you're absolutely right. There are prerequisites, and we need initially all these chapters to follow these. And obviously the chapters guide that you've created is the best thing to email to these people to make sure they understand. And there are plenty of other sub-chapters, by the way, I want to throw out there, plenty of other chapters out there, sub or not, that, official or not, that I have sitting on the sidelines. And if you're listening and I have contacted you and I've explained to you most likely that your site's not up to par, please get back in contact with me whenever you can, because I'm waiting for a lot of contacts from people out there, and I don't have time to keep re-emailing people. So if you're listening, please get back in contact so I know the status of your chapter. If chapters are dormant, there's no response, I'm just going to have to erase the connection and then get somebody else to fill in that blank, obviously. So anyway, so what else would you like to bring up, Gilbert?
I would like to the short and long-term ambitions for the chapter was something I would like to discuss. Just to address that quickly for everybody that's listening right now, because what is mainly the focus is to establish some fluent communication between chapters. In that respect, and I haven't informed you about this yet, Peter, but well, this is a good time to do it. We have established a email list for the chapters, which is a form of indirect communication for everybody that's really involved with the chapters, so that we can email each other during the time that there are no meetings.
And yes, I have that. I just haven't had a chance to compile it and send it to you. I will do that for you very, very soon.
Okay. Well, that's one way we're going to try and focus on creating better communication. Also, on that note, we're also trying to encourage as much chapters as possible to hold periodic meetings. Of course, I understand where there are beginning chapters, there cannot be immediate huge meetings, so that's not possible. But when you're starting to build a community, it's a good idea to hold periodic meetings just to keep your goals straight. Also, we're trying to create a framework for coordinated activism with the chapters, as everything is in the baby stages right now, to call it in a way. It's all more focused on the communications, but in time, I aspire to make sure that the chapter structure is built in a way that we can coordinate activism in certain regions of the world on a very easy basis. So that when we, for example, would like to do a coordinated action in Western Europe, then we will easily be in touch with all the chapters that are in the region that we would like to affect, and can set up some sort of action. So that's another ambition.
Yes.
And of course, this may sound a little bit of corporate talk, but to develop promotional strategies to raise awareness. And basically what I'm trying to say with this is to make sure that the chapters understand how to approach and engage people the most effective way, also to use the current system to spread the message in their country, and what are the best ways to do that. And a good example is Heather Odom from the United Kingdom, who did the UK Venus Project Taxi. I mean, all these strategies could be utilized by much more countries. It doesn't have to be unique to one country. But I just want to say props, because that was a really good job by the Zeitgeist Movement UK. But that's what I'm talking about.
I couldn't agree more. I really loved what they had done. And the media project that is still being developed is going to have just those issues denoted. It not only is going to have media outlets not only is going to have media expressions as far as mediums, meaning film or music or multimedia or anything people can come up with in an expression will be associated with this project. And I think, as you point out, a strategy section as far as how to engage the public with these different ideas of communication is going to be a big part of the media project as well. So hopefully that will resolve or begin to inspire people when we get this project finally up. In fact, that's a very open project. We could even have chapter associations with the media project where there could be some form of interfacing regionally for specific ideas. In case someone, for example, wanted to rent a billboard in Arkansas for the Venus Project and they wanted to pool in money to do so to pay for a billboard, well, that'd be a fantastic communal thing to do, and that could easily be a part of the media project as well. So I couldn't agree more.
Definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm sure that everybody here is very curious and how the media project is developing, although you did mention this earlier in the broadcast, but we just can't wait for the website to get online. I realize we're almost getting out of time, so I'll go quickly to the other points that we wanted to discuss. Yeah. One thing I would like to address is the current focus of the chapter's administration. Well, I already explained why there isn't, or we concluded why there is a need for this administration. But the current focus is trying to respond to questions as soon as possible. As Peter also noted, the response time is currently not very quick, and that's very understandable when you have multiple things going on. And that's why I asked Peter personally to make sure that some questions land in my mailbox so that I can respond to them as soon as possible, and with the expansion of the administration team that will also be much quicker. Also, like the meeting of international chapters that's happening after the show, that's also a current focus, to hold periodic meetings and keep them going.
Right.
To moderate the chapter developments, that's also what we've been talking about earlier, but it's also a very big focus, making sure that everybody gets everything they need to get their chapters started, and making sure that everything is in line with the standards we have set. And also, one more thing that we haven't discussed yet is that remediating conflicts currently, I'm not going to go into this in depth, but unfortunately not everything is going as smooth at every time, and sometimes conflicts arises, and this is where we would come in as well when there are conflicts between chapters or between the chapters and the website administration, just to make sure that this is solved as soon as possible, since it's a waste of the time currently that we should be spending on making people aware.
Yes, absolutely.
And that, as I promised, we will talk about the structure for the organizations of the chapters in a global framework. Well, I've been emailing with you, Peter. I don't know why I talk like this. I actually speak fluent English, but when I'm on a show like this, I get a little nervous and it gets out of hand.
You sound very, very clear. Don't worry.
Sorry.
That's
well,
okay.
The last thing I wanted to address was the structure of the chapters. So, basic idea I've been emailing with Peter about is creating a global framework, and we're already organizing the USA state chapters. My idea personally, so this has not been confirmed yet by anyone, is to create initially different sections divided into Europe, America, Australia, Africa, Asia, in these segments, so to say, to keep it as general as possible, and make sure that once we have activity in each of these areas, and activity is a lot, that we have somebody who is working on a more local level. In this respect, it would be continent-wise, to make sure that everything is running fine and communicating that through to us. To have somebody in a way responsible for that area. That's the way I see it happen. But of course, it's subject to change, and I would like to know what your opinion about that is, Peter.
I think that would be a great idea, and I think ultimately the expansion of what I would call the chapters team is going to be very, very important. In fact, all the things that you mentioned, are very much needed. Going back to the emails, the email response time is slow. I have sorters, but sorters can only do so much. I haven't been able to feel confident delegating communications to the movement outright. Well, certain tech things certainly are, but not actual questions and relationships. So in time, we're going to set up, again, a team that will basically get direct emails that are in relationship to the chapters. So that will be good. And as far as your comment about, conflicts, that will be another element of protocol. In fact, if you want to think about conflicts and add them into the chapter's guide that you're creating, maybe something just to comment on it, in case people have a problem, they know that there's a route to resolve it, obviously through meetings. And back to your final point, absolutely, I firmly agree that we need to expand, and we'll have people in such a position.
All right. Well, yeah, I will definitely incorporate it in the chapter's guide as soon as I can and have time for it. And I will definitely explain the steps to take for when a conflict arises. Actually, we're out of time, and I'm really enjoying it. But I have one last question for you, and
sure.
I was not sure. Are you coming to the meeting today, or?
Yes, I'll come by the meeting today. I can't stay that long, but I will be there at 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time.
Unpack your mic.
Excuse me?
Unpack your mic.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you.
I said unpack your mic.
Oh, well, actually, I did unpack my mic, and guess what? It doesn't work. In fact, this entire broadcast was supposed to be on a really nice mic, but I have a driver issue on one of my systems. I have about 8 computers, and I haven't had time to move everything around, and I just got frustrated, so I'm back on the phone here. I'll see if the mic works. I'll give it another shot, but I think I have to get a different mic, but that's for another subject. But
all right,
regardless, if I have to text, don't worry.
No problem. We'll have to be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you anyway for having me. I really enjoyed it, and too bad we didn't have...
We'll have you back on with different updates, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. I know everybody else does as well, Gilbert. Talk to you soon.
All right, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, it is 4:30 Eastern Daylight Time. Let me see if Neil is here from V Radio. And he is, so we're going to jump right into Neil.
Hello?
Hey, Neil.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, actually. You sound very clear. How's it going?
Pretty good, actually. It's excellent to finally be on your show.
Oh, absolutely. I've been great. Get great feedback from your show, and time goes by so quickly for me. It's these weeks go by like days, and I'm keeping track of things, and of course recognizing all the great work that other people are doing is so important, and it's been really, it's been exasperating because we have so many great people doing so much stuff. But this is Neil Kernan. Am I saying your name right, Kernan?
It's actually Kiernan, like the word cure, like cure for a disease, and then nen. It's an Irish name, so Kiernan.
Excellent. And you run v-radio.com, correct?
It's actually v-radio. It's v-radio.org, but yeah.
.org. I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't have it in front of me. Which is a radio show that you do for the Venus Project, I believe, every day now, right?
Well, I was doing that for a while. What I found was that it's really hard to talk about the same stuff over and over again. I used to do a lot of other political activist radio, and I mean, when you were in the Ron Paul movement or the Mike Gravel movement, there was always something new to talk about every day. I mean, you could talk about anything, but you can only talk about the Venus Project over and over again for so much before you start to feel like you're repeating yourself too much, and so that's why I've been focusing more on guests now, and I still do write original blog posts and do shows according to that, but it's another thing I've found is that being on an open schedule allows me to get guests from different parts of the world much easier, because then I don't have to ask them to call me at 7 p.m. every day. I can just set the show whenever.
Oh, that's fantastic, yeah. And I completely relate to what you're saying as far as content, which is why I engage these questions, because it's a great initializer, because I can go in tangents that I never would probably think of in regards to everyone's interests. Go ahead and give the audience a sense of your background. I know you're in the Libertarian Party. Is that correct? Go ahead. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I was. Basically, from when I was younger, my mom raised me to be very independent and critical thinking, the kind of person. Actually, I told Jacques about that. He was very happy with it. He smiled very wide when I told him about my childhood. But
good. And
that led me to be very politically open-minded. I stayed an independent for the longest time, a fierce independent actually, because of some of the things George Washington said in his farewell address. Was he felt that it would polarize the country if we had these political parties, and people wouldn't be worried about being an American. They'd be worried about being the Democrat or Republican. And everything he basically said came true, aside from the fact now that there isn't really much difference between the two of them.
Sure.
What got me to wake up more to the point was I was never really asleep. I just wasn't really paying attention because I didn't really think there was much I could do. Was the moment that I got to listen to This friend of mine linked me a Ron Paul video of him in one of the debates where he like comes out and says, well, they didn't attack us because we're free. They attacked us because, of us bombing their countries and stuff like that. I was like, wow, did he just say that out loud? Right. A politician actually just, and that's what got me started. I got involved with the Ron Paul movement and the Libertarian movement at that point, and it's very hard to get through to Ron Paul, and it doesn't surprise me because he's got a lot of weirdos in his movement, unfortunately. But when I was there, I got involved in internet radio there and internet TV, I took those skills and applied them now to the Zeitgeist Movement. That's what the radio and Zeitgeist TV is all about. I then met Senator Mike Gravel, who was, you may remember, kind of a fiery old man with glasses. In my opinion, changed the course of the Democratic side of things because he kind of knocked Hillary off of her peg by proving that she was a liar about her positions about the war. I met him and actually convinced him to come to the Libertarian Party because I felt that he'd be more appreciated there, and I went to the Libertarian National Convention. I mean, he basically said, well, if you're getting me into this, you're coming with me. So he made me join the party with him, and we went down there, and we did good. I think that party wasn't really ready to listen to his ideas, and that's why I still consider myself somewhat of a libertarian, but my position, actually watching your movie Zeitgeist Addendum really kind of set me apart. Felt that I basically lost all sense of ideas that free market capitalism was ever going to work. And I'd always had some little inklings and concerns that it wasn't a good idea. But Addendum really laid it out for me, and then basically at that point I changed my focus. But yeah, in the time that I was in the Libertarian Party, I ran for Congress in Michigan's 10th District against the Bush puppet Candace Miller. Sure. And I did pretty good there, at least to do what it is that I wanted to. And I have all this energy about trying to do something positive for the world, and I didn't really have anywhere to put it. And that kind of led me to calling Roxanne. And people tend to think it's like some dark art to talk to Jacques and Roxanne, but it really was as simple as me just calling them and her picking up the phone and me getting to know them. And then they came up to Michigan to do a lecture, and I got to sit and talk with them for a couple hours beforehand. They asked me to meet with them because of the positive conversations we had, and that's when I talked to them about being a spokesman, not the spokesman, not anything really official. There's no paper or certificate on my wall. I just wanted to be able to say, okay, do you feel that I'm confident enough, or competent enough, more as a point, to be able to do this for you and speak for you? And I wanted to know what he wanted me to do to accomplish that, and he pretty much laid it out just to say, well, read this book, Best Money Can't Buy, and he sat down and talked to me about how to approach people, Then I went down to Venus, Florida recently and visited them and got to see a lot of amazing things, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to do that before, if and when they do lose the site. I don't know what's going on with that recently, but
right.
In any case, though, that's my background now. Is I'm still a member of the National Committee for the Boston Tea Party, which is a smaller splinter group of the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party has largely been infiltrated by a lot of people who are very similar to the neoconservatives in their thinking, which is why you got Bob Barr as our nominee. And so the Boston Tea Party is kind of a party on side of that, and I created a resource-based economy caucus within the Boston Tea Party. Recently I've also looked into the Green Party as I just by curiosity looked at their platform, and I went, wow, this is very compelling. These people think a lot of the same things we do. I still don't think that the political system is the way to go, mostly because I see where it's coming from. But like with the third-party politics, you don't really expect to get anybody elected. You just expect to put pressure on the main candidates. And for example, when I was running for Congress, most people didn't even know anything about Candace Miller as far as what she was doing at a federal level, because she was doing such a good job of kissing butt on the local level that they didn't know that she had voted for all sorts of stuff that was against the Constitution, all kinds of violations of privacy. She has the nickname of being the rubber stamp for the Bush administration.
Right.
And nobody knew about that. And that actually, I wasn't going to beat her, but I put a lot of pressure on her. And she, for example, changed her vote on the bailout issue and said that she suddenly was tired of voting for stuff, these were her words, was that voting for stuff that George Bush was trying to put through fear. And I'm like, wow, well, it's nice that she finally came along with that. But that's basically my background. I'm big into political activism, and I know we're not a political movement per se, but when I say political activism, it's more just about social change to be achieved through the the outlets that people are looking for, because people still think that the political system can change things, and if you want to get to people who actually care, I have found that third-party political activists are generally the people to talk to.
I couldn't agree more. I give a lot of lip service to not being a political institution, mainly just because I want to make sure that differentiation between a social movement and a political movement is made very clear. However, I stand totally open to any route. I mean, obviously, we need some type of strategy. So engaging the Green movement, engaging any party or any sub-party or anything, really, that has influential players that can get information into the political spectrum, so to speak, into Congress, into anywhere, is going to be the route we have to take. Obviously, we can't just ignore the political establishment. They are the given establishment, and we have to begin to impose influence. I use the word lobbying as a loose term, mainly just putting pressure on it. But I completely agree with that, and I think it's fantastic you started that resource-based economy caucus. Out of curiosity, what was the feedback from that?
Basically this is what it did. It allowed me, first of all, once again, it gives me an opportunity to use some of my resources that are politically oriented only. I am also a writer for Independent Political Report, which is perhaps one of the most, probably is the biggest source of third-party news you can get on the Internet. And I was able to post articles about the things going on in the Boston Tea Party that had to do with the caucus. If I hadn't done that, it would not have been appropriate for me to go there and post an article just about some movement that wasn't politically oriented. So basically, it allowed me to get allowed me to get Zeitgeist and the Venus Project into the eyes and ears of a lot of people who normally would not have been exposed. Now, as far as reaction within the party, there was mixed reactions to it. A lot of it is that one of the problems with the Boston Tea Party is that it also had a lot of the anarchists from the Libertarian Party in it, and some of those people are scared of anything that looks remotely like a state. It wasn't until I studied the way that they think that I was able to come across to them and say, well, look, what we're talking about actually has a couple of things in common with some of these anarchist schools, and that got them to calm down a little bit. Anarcho-communism and anarcho-syndicalism have some things in common with it, but overall, you're going to find that the people who like the free market are almost religious about it. It's very hard to get through to them. So it was rough, but overall, it allowed us to get a voice into places, and I did win some people over because largely they came to me expecting to be able to win the argument, and they didn't. And that kind of left them either they would retreat and not say anything further and at least stop being hostile, or some of them actually did come over and say, you know what, this isn't such a bad idea. And if you listen to some of my radio shows, for example, the name Libertarian got one of my regular listeners to call in, and he asked me about what was going on. This is a total free market capitalist guy, and now he's willing to say that the free market capitalist system is good, but so is the Venus Project system, and that he feels that both of them could work. So, I mean,
very good.
That's progress.
That certainly is progress, and that, as you denoted in your talking points, as far as communication strategies, we do have to find ways to get through to people of all walks. I mean, the free market system certainly is a religion. When I talk about the free market to people initially, I always have to gauge their general background. For example, if I speak to somebody who's very Christian, for example, Michael Moore's new film, Capitalism, A Love Story, has a very odd twist he does at the end where he talks about he talks about capitalism. Capitalism and free market are essentially synonymous. And he says capitalism is anti-Christian and anti-democratic. And the anti-Christian aspect, he's been using that rhetoric in a lot of his interviews as I've been trying to follow this. And I find that to be actually pretty persuasive if you really feel if people that are Christian-oriented, at least in the egalitarian sense, I don't mean the fire and brimstone sense. We have is a huge spectrum that people call themselves Christians, but nevertheless, those that have a humanity to them, they will be much more inclined to favor this information if you present it in that context. And I think that's a terrific strategy. But it's if anything you'd like to say on this point of communication, you're totally open to do so because it's certainly an important point.
It also depends on, like I had said in our email, was that it also depends on the kind of person's, for example, some people you can't get to sit through an hour-long presentation, let alone a 2-hour movie. So I would give them The Story of Stuff. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a really good movie about, just how we can't keep doing the linear consumption cycle. Some people, the Zeitgeist presentation on the Federal Reserve and the fractional reserve stuff doesn't seem to click in their head, so I might hit them with Money as Debt, which with its cartoon presentations, very simple, very easy to understand. But also when it comes to religion, like I was saying, my brother is an engineer. He's also extremely Christian, and if I showed him anything anti-religious, it would be an immediate turnoff. But if you talk about a world where everybody can take care of everybody and everything will be fine and there'll be no poverty and no war, there's no Christian who won't embrace that. At least most Christians, won't have a problem with embracing that, not real ones. Sure. And it also depends on denominations. Like the Quakers, for example, the Society of Friends actually still very much exists, and I think that if you told them about like our world, what it is that we propose, they would be totally on board with it because they're nonviolent, pacifist people by nature and would love to see violence go away and a world where people take care of each other. And that's really it. I mean, when it comes to communications issues, a lot of it has to do with the values of the people in question. And Jacques talked with me about that a lot about when I was talking about being a spokesman, was that you have to be able to kind of analyze the person. It's like the story he gave about his mother and how he reached his mother about racism. He would never have been able to get through to her any other way. And that's kind of where it comes from. And I think that as far as that's also I said earlier, the value of the third party of political stuff is also just because you end up dealing if you deal with the regular person, the person who really thinks that the whole world is about Obama versus McCain and doesn't understand the real stuff that's going on, those people are going to be a bit harder to reach. But somebody who's already at a third-party political convention, like the Green Party or the Libertarian Party, is already looking for answers, already realizes that the mainstream is not the way to go. And that's why I felt that that was where I was going to concentrate my energy. And definitely when it comes to communicating with different people, it's about the films you choose. I've actually been thinking about starting another band. I used to be a musician, and I had an idea of starting a band called Spirit of the Age, basically to go after Zeitgeist.
Sure.
And where I would just invite people from all over the world to participate, because I realized one day recently that you can make music over the internet so easily,
right.
Because I can record a vocal track, and then you can record the guitar, and then somebody else can record the drums, and then we make an MP3, and suddenly we have a song.
Yeah.
Because music is a good way to reach people, and in many cases, Jacques actually talks about how dangerous it can be because people can become addicted to it, and you just keep listening to the same thing over and over again. But it's a matter of kind of turning those tools that the establishment uses to control you against them. It's actually why I have this little box that I hook up to my computer that hooks up to my television. So all of the stuff going into my television is selected from the internet, and I think that people should do that too. Take control of your TV. Use it as a tool for yourself rather than for advertising companies or whatever else. But
absolutely.
And that was basically, it's a matter of trying to figure out how to relate to people, and that's, I think, something, we kind of turn our backs on politicians, but some of those people know how to do this. You have to be able to understand the value system of the person you're talking to. For example, some people don't want to hear about conspiracy theories, some people do. Some people don't want to hear about religion, some people do, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. That's one of the great things I learned from Jacques, and he gives all these great examples when you speak with Jacques about different things that he's done to turn around the KKK, to turn around all these groups that you would think would be untouchable in their indoctrination. But it can be done, and people can change, and that's an important realization. Back on your point on as far as art and music, I couldn't agree more. The advertising, corporate media, the graphic mind control, or for lack of a better expression, you have with television specifically. They hit you in so many different strategic ways with these aesthetics that have been very well orchestrated to get you to want to believe whatever it is that they're talking about. That can be used for positive means as opposed to negative means. Just as the John Lennon song Imagine is the example I give the most. What an amazing song, one of the most prolifically recognized songs probably in the world, at least according to Yoko Ono, and I think that probably holds true. And what is it? It has actually a meaning using the method of song. And I think using art and bands and everyone out there, that's why the Zeitgeist Media Project is very important to me, because I want everyone to have some fun creating art and representations and expressions that actually have a tangible meaning. I think art without some form of social conscience is kind of meaningless because it's always a communicative affair. All art is communicative unless you just paint for yourself and keep it in your basement and that's that. I don't know anybody that makes art that wants to keep it to themselves. It's a form of communication. I think it's a powerful one at that. As the example I've used before about the great cathedrals, all that beautiful stained glass. I remember going to mass myself, and you walk in, there's the beautiful music, and this amazing environment, and they give you a little bit of alcoholic wine, which sends a weird shiver down your spine.
Right.
Especially if you're a kid, and they put that little wafer on your tongue, and you go back, and they have these calls and answers. It's just the most profound form of brainwashing, which could easily be used for positive ends. it doesn't have to be for the establishment control.
Well, yeah, and if you think about it, the 60s music had a lot to do with the getting out of the war, in a lot of ways. I mean, some of it was kind of drug-related, but you get my point. There was still a very serious theme. It was like an anthem of a generation. It was a way to reach people. Also, you'll notice a trend, to me, is that music also kind of got dumbed down for a long time. I mean, I used to be able to listen to Metallica or Megadeth and be able to get a political charge of why we should change the world, and then the music movement changed. It was like all of a sudden it was the grunge thing really, for example, I don't want to offend anybody, but the grunge thing is actually what got me out of music, because I was like, what is this stuff? These people aren't thinking. This isn't socially conscious. This doesn't have any purpose. It's not making me happy to be alive. It's not making me it was just crap, and it's starting to change, though. I'm noticing a serious change in the music industry, and that's actually what made me hope that we could create a band, called Spirit of the Age, where we talked about what it is that we wanted to do.
Sure. No, I think that's a great idea. Anything like that is certainly effective, and I agree with you entirely. Somehow we went from the 70s, 80s, and 90s to this really twisted gesture coming from the 80s, 90s. In the hip hop world, this bling, gun, drug association, that's slowly fading. Whereas suddenly for the whole a decade, everyone just wanted to have a bunch of money. It really permeates. It's unbelievable the effect that this type of media has, which is why even the people that don't like my movies and they say they're sensationalized, I do target those films to have an emotional effect. And I think in the end, there's only so much you can do by talking to people directly. You have to get under their skin somehow in communication, and that goes back to your identification point. It has to be relatable in some way. We have to use the advertising techniques against the system, for lack of a better expression. If you use it in a positive and honest way, they're not just contrivances and manipulation. It has to have an honest focus. But I completely agree. That's a very terrific point. Point. Yeah. So we have about 8 minutes now. Anything else you want to cover?
Actually, the open source ecology movement. For those of you who listen to V Radio, I had Marcin. He was a PhD from the open source ecology movement on my show. And for those of you who are looking for something to do that's we're actually putting the shovel in the dirt, so to speak, or getting your hands dirty trying to create this technology, the open source ecology movement is basically a group of engineers who are spending all of their time inventing self-sustainable technologies to be given away open source, just free to anybody who wants them.
Wow.
And for the purpose of being able to move this along, basically, the funny thing is you do run into these people sometimes. When I talk to Marcin, I sent him to the Venus Project website. He's like, wow, a resource-based economy. That's what I've been advocating all my life, and I didn't even know what it was.
Wow. Exactly.
Those guys are based out of Missouri, and I think we should definitely check them out. They're looking for help with what they're doing. They're looking for, basically, I know there are a lot of people in the movement who are really anxious to get started on something, and they're really impatient. They're not satisfied with just spreading the message. But as Marcin pointed out, there is a value to what he's doing, because we can point at the stuff that they're accomplishing and point to the naysayers and say, look, these guys are doing this with this tiny budget. There's no reason we can't do it.
Exactly.
That's basically what I wanted to touch on, and I hope that I know that Marcin, for example, would love to be featured in one of the future Zeitgeist films, is what he said. I managed to get him to sit down and watch all of your movies, so with any luck.
Yes, that's a good point. Basically what I was going to say is that I have been looking into that organization and a few others that have sympathetic overtones, and as I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, I'm trying to have a Venus Project Symposium weekend, literally, which is in this big 3-4 building that I'm in negotiations with right now in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And it could be absolutely profound, not only to have Jacques' models, the 3D renderings coming out of the UK project, or what was formerly known as the UK project, and all these other contributions, the Zeitgeist Media Project, rotating lectures, but having other organizations come there as well. For example, perhaps the Bucky Fuller Foundation, which is in Brooklyn, which fortunately they're a little isolated. They tend not to intermingle that much, but nevertheless, I'm trying to do what I can. And of course, the open source ecology movement would be fantastic as well, and other sympathetic organizations working in some way parallel to some attributes, all coming in under the umbrella of the Venus Project. So that's one of my intents, and I hope that can work out. But by all means, I'm going to look more into that organization. And in Zeitgeist, the third installment, I am going to have feature a lot of different third-party organizations in many different contexts that are doing respectable work in different ways for the betterment of humanity in a holistic, nonprofit sense. So by all means, maybe you can send me his email and I can open up a dialogue.
Certainly. That would be great. And I don't know if this is something you'd be interested in, but I was talking to people about the possibility of when you go to these political conventions, generally you can get a table to set up and just be able to sit and talk to people and pass out literature. The Green Party convention is coming up next year. I was hoping it'd be great if you or Jacques or both or either could at some point make just make an effort to come out here and do that, or if somebody from the Zeitgeist Movement can help me do it. But
yes, yeah. Well, is there a chapter in your particular area? This would be a great thing for a chapter to begin work with. These are the types of ideas that we're hoping the chapters will take upon themselves, and of course with guidance from us. And if it was the kind of thing where we could get speaking time, I'm sure we could get Jacques to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm working on. It depends on the way that the convention is organized, though.
Sure.
You can't just address the Green Party convention just starting, but in some cases you can get a room, for example, to address certain people who may show up.
Sure. No, those are great ideas. I think the Green Party is really has a natural gravitation to what we're talking about. Anybody that is associated with the planet and resources really needs to be aware of the Venus Project, because in my mind, there really is no other. There's no other way. I can't think of. Believe me, I've tried to think of other possibilities, and it always gravitates back to the Venus Project because it's so simple, it's so obvious what they're talking about. It's just the value systems that we have to get through, as you very well know.
Yeah, that's it's been great, and I want to thank you very much for bringing me on and allowing me to talk about V Radio.
Yeah, get that website out one more time, and you have a blog. It's on Blog Talk Radio, correct?
Yes, it is. It's basically the minus sign, radio.org. And there you can go, and it gives links to various things that will get you to my shows and my archives, things of that nature. And I'm hoping, actually, maybe one of these days I can get a certain Peter Joseph on my show.
Sure.
I get Jacques and Roxanne on my show all the time. But
I know you do, and I think that's great. And I'll have you back on as well. I'm trying to open this format up, going to once a week, so I do have other people come on and give, so-called progress reports or just anything, any feedback that I think the audience would care to hear, rather than hear me talk constantly, babbling on. All right, man. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
All right, Neil. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. And ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 minutes left. I'm going to close this out. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover, and I want to thank everybody again for joining me. I think it was a lot of fun, and I hope everyone out there got to get some decent perspectives on some different angles about the developments of the movement. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'll be back next Wednesday to continue filling you guys in. I'm also trying to be more active on the forum and just continually be more active. It's tough. I have a complex life in general, a complex personal life, but I'm slowly getting things organized, and hopefully progress will speed up. Okay, everybody. Take care, and talk to you all soon.